At dawn in the outskirts of Envigado, Colombia, a quiet industrial zone flickered on the radar screens of U.S. naval intelligence. A power surge, abnormal, rhythmic, and strong enough to light a shipyard, pulsed from a warehouse registered as a truck repair facility. Within minutes, the signal was relayed through the interagency network, FBI Field Office Bogota, Colombian National Police, and the Naval Intelligence Fusion Center in Key West. Something inside that garage was drawing more electricity than a small factory. For 3 months, joint analysts had been tracking suspicious cargo flows between Medellin and the Caribbean. Trucks with blank manifests, ghost companies, transferring funds through Panama and Hong Kong, and encrypted radio bursts near the Venezuelan border. Each clue pointed to one thing: a cartel operation hiding behind the mask of legitimate industry. Now the pattern had converged on a single location. Envigado wasn't new to law enforcement. It was once the heart of Pablo Escobar's empire, rebuilt after decades of chaos. But what investigators saw this time was far more advanced. A cartel operating like a corporation, with logistics, chemistry, and financial architecture designed to evade every level of detection. Intelligence suggested the site belonged to the Clan del Golfo, backed by Venezuela's Tren de Aragua, both running a cross-border network worth billions. If the signal was real, this wasn't just another drug bust. It was the doorway into a global industrial syndicate. Could Washington and Bogota stop it before the next shipment reached American shores? If you want to see how real operations unfold beyond the limits of the law, where the US Navy and FBI joined forces to stop global criminal empires, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Military Power so you won't miss the next secret we uncover. By midnight, the picture had hardened from suspicion to near certainty. The modest building signed as a truck repair shop in Envigado was not a garage in any conventional sense, but a deliberately camouflaged industrial complex engineered to produce narcotics at a scale normally associated with legitimate manufacturing. High-resolution satellite passes, thermal imagery, and hours of drone loitering revealed a footprint and heat signature that did not match light mechanical work. Instead, the compound radiated steady, high-temperature cycles through the night, a telltale signature of continuous chemical processing. Under the cracked concrete floor, investigators would later find 5 stainless steel reactors, each roughly the size of a compact automobile, and plumbed into a web of pumps, condensers, and automated control panels, a configuration capable of producing more than 2,000 pounds of crystal meth per reactor per week when run at capacity. The result was a product purity rarely seen on the street. Samples later tested at 99.3%, a level that pushed the supply chain from artisanal trafficking into industrial manufacture. Financial and cyber investigators assembled that technical picture into an operational map. Bank transaction analyses traced repeated million-dollar flows through a chain of shell entities registered in Panama, Curacao, and Hong Kong, and the movement of funds fit an organized cadence rather than sporadic criminal transfers. Each waypoint in the financial chain was hidden by layers of encryption and intermediary accounts, reappearing in ledgers as sanitized entries, logistics revenue, equipment procurement that masked the true commodity. For roughly 3 months, cyber teams and financial crimes units had been piecing together these sanitized trails, while signals intelligence mapped the on-the-ground logistics. Ghost trucks with cloned plates that turned off their transponders near dead drops, silent warehouses that showed up only on sporadic CCTV captures, and abrupt surges in power consumption across Colombia's manufacturing belt that corresponded with nighttime processing windows. Physical surveillance filled in the rest. Colombian Air Force drones, flying low to avoid detection, confirmed a series of engineering choices meant to conceal scale and sustain production. Mainline electric meters feeding the compound were found to have been tampered with or digitally reprogrammed to underreport draws, a modification that hid massive kilowatt-hour usage from utility monitors and obscured the true cost of continuous operation. Exhaust that should have been processed through scrubbers and stacks was routed into false ventilation ducts disguised as truck exhaust, displacing visible signatures into the municipal sewer and river system rather than the open air, while a deliberately constructed tunnel tunneled from the compound's rear wall to an abandoned boat dock on a minor tributary, an intended nocturnal loading point where sealed barrels could be moved directly onto speedboats without attracting port attention. Between October 8th and 10th, intelligence flowed like a tightening noose. Satellite constellations tracked a convoy of box trucks heading north from Envigado toward a remote port outside Barranquilla, and GPS pings, one of which had been surreptitiously placed weeks earlier on a suspect vehicle, blinked to life near the shoreline, confirming that the cargo, an estimated 4,000 pounds of methamphetamine base, was being staged for maritime transfer. Analysts calculated retail values based on street purity and distribution tiers, and each discrete shipment was conservatively valued at close to $200 million on the American retail market. When multiplied by the observed 3-week rotation cycle, the transportation backbone could carry roughly 10,000 kilograms a year. Those figures transformed the case from a local nuisance into a transnational economic phenomenon. This was not petty smuggling. It was a revenue stream with the power to distort markets and fund parallel structures of power. Inside the Joint Command Center, the operational tempo ratcheted up. Video feeds from drones, intercepted radio traffic, financial snapshots, and satellite overlays were fused in real time on analysts' screens, and the room quickly developed a sense of urgency that went beyond the usual cadence of narcotics interdiction. If the cartel sustained its production and shipping rhythm, their annual take would begin to rival modest national exports. Intelligence officers compared projected revenues to energy earnings in small states to convey the strategic weight of the problem. That projection reframed the mission. What began as a law enforcement strike had to become a combined arms interdiction, because the cartel had built not only chemistry and logistics, but also a financial architecture that would keep running unless decisive disruption occurred. Yet urgency carried its own risks. The combination of large-scale chemical processing and a live assault presented a hazardous problem set. Puncturing a reactor could generate a catastrophic release. An uncontrolled ignition of solvents threatened both the assaulting teams and any forced labor victims inside. Commanders therefore balanced the need for surprise and speed against the hazards of a violent breach. Plans accounted for containment, hazmat entry, and rescue corridors. But the analysts also acknowledged that cartel operators had engineered redundancies and deception into the site. False walls, deliberately sabotaged suppression systems, and multiple egress routes designed to create confusion under stress. In short, the compound had been built to withstand casual inspection and to complicate any kinetic response. The stakes were both human and strategic. If the Allied task force failed to act in the window before the trucks departed, more than 2 tons of near-pharmaceutical methamphetamine would be injected into markets across continents before sunrise, amplifying overdose risks and funding criminal enterprise for months to come. If instead the raid succeeded, the operation promised to remove not only an immediate shipment, but a critical node in a supply chain that spanned ports, shell corporations, and encrypted financial corridors. That binary, stop the convoy or let it sail, pressed down on the team as clocks ticked toward the breach time. As satellite passes narrowed and radio silence settled, the final brief moved through the chain of command. Synchronize breach, secure evidence, rescue any victims, and prepare to exploit digital devices on site for lead generation. What the analysts could not yet know was how violently the compound might resist, or how one stray bullet in a confined, chemically charged environment could escalate tactical decisions into a blaze that would consume both infrastructure and evidence. The prediction was grim but clear. The next phase of the mission would not be a quiet surgical strike. It would likely ignite one of the fiercest and most dangerous firefights seen in Colombia's highlands in years. Would the Allied task force move fast enough to stop the 4,000-pound shipment before it reached the sea? The answer depended on speed, coordination, and a willingness to bring military precision to what had been a criminal enterprise operating like a multinational firm. Operation Silent Harbor moved from planning to violence just after midnight on October 11th. At 1:30 a.m., a three-axis task force slipped into position. An FBI hostage rescue team flanking the compound, Colombian Special Operations units on the southern approach, and U.S. Navy observers feeding overwatch from maritime patrol assets and coastal radars. Command and control was tight, with real-time feeds from drones, signals intelligence, and the lab of analysts in Bogota synchronized to a single countdown. The objective was surgical: breach the facility, secure the evidence, and stop the outbound convoy before those 4,000 pounds of meth ever hit the sea. When the breach charge detonated at 1:31 a.m., steel doors sheared open and operators surged forward. Night vision turned the garage into a grid of moving shadows. Chemical drums glinted under emergency lights as masked figures scrambled for cover. Within seconds, the situation hardened into a firefight. Adrenaline and procedure took over, but the chaos was instantaneous. More than 1,400 rounds were fired inside and around the compound before the exchange subsided. Small rooms designed for process control became killing zones, and the air filled with choking, acrid smoke from burning solvents and blown seals. A single, ill-timed round changed the calculus. A projectile pierced one of the stainless steel reactors beneath the floor, and the chemistry went kinetic. Vapors ignited, plastic piping ruptured, and an inferno raced through containment channels that had never been meant for open flame. Operators backed out to establish a secure perimeter, while hazmat teams in rebreathers prepared for entry. Fire suppression systems installed by the cartel proved either inadequate or sabotaged to create distractions, which intensified the dangers for both rescuers and captives. Despite the flames, the raid achieved its primary aims. 15 cartel gunmen were put out of action during the assault, and investigators later confirmed that many of them were combat veterans recruited from paramilitary ranks. Behind a false wall and beneath scorched concrete, teams uncovered a cache of crystal meth, so pure and so voluminous that forensic chemists had to move samples to off-site labs to avoid contamination. In total, more than 6,000 pounds of near-pharmaceutical-grade methamphetamine were seized on site, a haul that represented tens of millions of retail doses and a single catastrophic disruption to the organization's supply pipeline. The human toll revealed the cruelty behind the statistics. 5 workers found chained in a rear vault had the marks of forced labor and chemical exposure, suffering burns and respiratory injury from continuous contact with caustic reagents and solvents. Medical teams administered emergency treatment while investigators began rapid victim interviews to build criminal and humanitarian cases. The rescued workers provided the first concrete leads tying Envigado's facility to identical installations elsewhere, although many details remained encrypted or destroyed in the blaze. Forensic teams started processing the scene even as firefighters kept hot spots under control. Mobile labs cataloged reactors, condenser arrays, and improvised distillation columns that showed industrial engineering rather than backyard chemistry. Financial analysts began a parallel sweep of seized devices, while cyber forensics worked to recover GPS traces and intercept logs that would point to shipping windows and command nodes. Every recovered hard drive or phone risked being compromised by heat, smoke, or intentional wiping, so analysts raced to extract whatever fragments remained. By dawn, the compound was a burned husk, but the intelligence value of what remained was already clear. The raid had not only stopped a shipment and destroyed a critical node in the network, it had also forced the cartel to reveal its maritime timetable. As teams readied for the next phase, intercepted chatter, hinted that shipments were underway off the Venezuelan coast and that the sea fight to come would determine whether the operation's disruption was temporary or permanent. Would the Allied task force be able to turn a successful raid on land into a strategic victory at sea? At 3 a.m., the encrypted chatter intercepted from the Envigado raid finally made sense. Coordinates hidden inside a confiscated satellite phone pointed to two freighters idling 35 nautical miles off Venezuela's Paria Gulf. The vessels, San Miguel and Corazon del Sur, were registered under shell companies linked to Curaçao and Hong Kong. U.S. naval intelligence confirmed what the pattern implied. This was the next link in the $5 billion chain, and the convoy was already preparing to offload narcotics to fast boats bound for the Lesser Antilles. From the skies, an MH-60R Seahawk helicopter cut through the darkness, its sensors tracking heat signatures across the rolling sea. Below, 3 radar blips moved in formation, small, fast, and heavily armed. As the Seahawk dropped to 200 feet, the calm night erupted into chaos. At 3:19 a.m., tracer rounds arced upward, ripping past the fuselage. The cartel's escort boats had opened fire first, using heavy machine guns mounted on modified fishing hulls. The pilot banked hard and unleashed a burst from the .50 caliber GAU-21, shredding one speedboat in seconds. Flames reflected off the waves, turning the sea into a patchwork of light and smoke. Over the comms, a U.S. Navy destroyer standing 20 nautical miles away authorized the RHIB assault teams to advance. Within minutes, 2 rigid hull inflatables carrying 12 operators each roared across the surf toward the freighter. The sound of rotor blades mixed with the staccato echo of gunfire as the boarding teams closed in. The cartel fighters were disciplined. From the deck of San Miguel, they returned fire with rifles and grenade launchers, forcing the first RHIB to break formation. But naval gunners aboard the Seahawk responded with suppressive bursts, tearing through the upper deck railings. Under that cover, the assault teams hooked onto the hull and climbed the ladders under a storm of bullets. The engagement lasted barely 8 minutes. A close-quarters clash fought across narrow gangways slick with fuel and salt water. By 3:28 a.m., resistance collapsed. 17 cartel operatives were captured alive, many of them wounded. Below deck, agents found 2,100 pounds of methamphetamine stored in sealed drums marked as industrial solvent, and another 1,900 pounds hidden inside floating tanks that the crew had attempted to dump overboard. The combined street value exceeded $350 million. The freighter's hold also contained coded manifests, radio equipment, and encrypted hard drives identical to those seized in Envigado, proof that the maritime operation and the inland superlab were part of one system. As dawn approached, the scale of the seizure became evident. The freighters had been fitted with false bulkheads and reinforced compartments, indicating that they had transported dozens of identical shipments before. Evidence logs would later show they ran on a 3-week cycle, connecting ports in Venezuela, Panama, and Trinidad under false flags. Every voyage was disguised as agricultural trade, using falsified bills of lading and digital customs stamps generated by hacked servers. Once the area was secure, Navy divers inspected the surrounding waters and discovered more floating containers, still sealed and buoyant. Chemical analysis confirmed their content: high-purity meth, bound for North American markets. Each barrel could yield millions of dollars in profit, yet together they symbolized something more: an industrialized narcotics economy, moving through the same sea lanes as legitimate commerce. The operation's success reverberated across command channels. Within hours, a combined task force took control of the vessels and towed them toward a secure naval pier in Curaçao. Intelligence officers immediately began cataloging the onboard electronics, knowing that inside the encrypted drives lay the financial arteries of the entire syndicate. For the U.S., this was more than a drug bust. It was a test of modern maritime warfare against a new kind of enemy, one that used cargo manifests instead of missiles, but operated with the same precision and ruthlessness. As the sun rose over the Caribbean, smoke still drifted from the wreck of a burning speedboat. The water shimmered gold, reflecting both victory and warning. The sea had just proven to be a battlefield, and America's next line of defense no longer ended at its shores. Would the data found aboard San Miguel expose the full extent of the $5 billion empire? The answer waited in the encrypted drives now heading to the FBI lab in Quantico. By October 12th, the Caribbean operation had turned from combat to analysis. At a secured hangar in Curaçao, FBI digital forensics teams worked through the night, surrounded by confiscated hard drives, encrypted tablets, and maritime logs recovered from the freighters. The data extracted from San Miguel alone reached 2.4 terabytes, containing financial ledgers, GPS patterns, and coded messages written in layered encryption software designed for offshore banking. Piece by piece, the structure of a hidden empire came into focus. Investigators soon uncovered 51 offshore accounts and 7 shell corporations routing funds through Panama, Curaçao, and Hong Kong. The same accounts linked directly to a logistics front registered in Venezuela and traced back to the Clan del Golfo and Tren de Aragua. Intelligence analysts realized the two syndicates were not mere partners. They were co-founders of a multinational narcotics consortium, structured like a corporate alliance. Each quarter, they planned to export up to 20,000 pounds of methamphetamine, equal to more than 100 million individual doses, circulating every 3 months across the Americas. Cross-referencing shipment manifests with intercepted emails revealed the scope of their industrial reach. The Envigado Superlab was just one of 4 identical facilities stretching across Colombia and Venezuela. Each was capable of generating nearly $400 million per month, feeding into a combined annual revenue estimated at $5 billion, on par with the GDP of several small nations. Unlike older cartels built on violence and chaos, this alliance functioned like an enterprise. Accountants, chemists, and logistics managers replacing soldiers, yet protected by the same ruthless enforcement networks. At Quantico, intelligence briefings described Silent Harbor as a blueprint for a new kind of warfare, a hybrid battle fought simultaneously on land, sea, and in cyberspace. The coordination between the FBI, US Navy, and Colombian Special Forces demonstrated how military precision could dismantle organized crime when traditional policing alone was no longer enough. Yet behind every success, there was a sobering realization. This was not the end of the war, only the exposure of how far it had evolved. For US Command, the message was strategic and unsettling. The modern cartel no longer hides in jungles or back alleys. It operates through digital ledgers, encrypted shipping systems, and legitimate-looking logistics firms that blur the line between commerce and crime. Money laundering has become industrialized. The frontier between legal trade and narcotics has all but vanished. As cleanup teams in Colombia sealed the burned remnants of the Envigado facility, investigators confirmed that Operation Silent Harbor had dismantled an entire production network. 4 major laboratories destroyed, over 10,000 pounds of meth seized, and dozens of senior cartel operatives captured. But the data recovered hinted at something larger, a shadow economy spanning 3 continents, quietly shaping political influence, port ownership, and trade routes. In the end, Silent Harbor was not just a victory, it was a warning. The next generation of cartels no longer relies on street wars or smuggling tunnels. They build industries. Their weapons are encryption, finance, and technology. And while the ocean may have swallowed their fleet, the blueprint for globalized crime remains afloat in the digital sea. If a $5 billion drug empire can operate with the sophistication of a tech company, what does that mean for the future of national security? Like this video and subscribe to Military Power because the next operation may already be underway.